G'day curd nerds. Today we're making Pecorino Romano. Yes, I've finally done it. I managed to find a source of raw sheep's milk. A big thanks goes out to Graham Strong from Arcadia Saltbush Lamb up in the Riverina area of New South Wales. He is trying a bit of an experiment at the moment by milking some of his merino sheep and see what sort of results he gets. Anyway, I decided to use the raw milk without pasteurisation and made a Pecorino Romano following the Australian-New Zealand food safety requirements for making cheese with raw milk. So let's see how I made Pecorino Romano. So the raw milk was frozen during transport from farm to me to keep it at a safe temperature. Now the ingredients for this cheese is 10 litres or 10 quarts of unpasteurised ewe's milk, an eighth of a teaspoon of thermophilic culture, 1.5 ml or quarter of a teaspoon of calcium chloride diluted in 60 ml of cool non-chlorinated water, 2 millilitres or 3/8 of a teaspoon of liquid rennet at IMCU 200 diluted in 60 millilitres of cool non-chlorinated water. You'll also need a saturated brine solution which is at 18% and has been cooled to room temperature. Now you can see that the milk is still very, very cold there, and we're going to heat that up now to 32 degrees Celsius, which is 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's fairly close, and you can see the milk is now liquid and not frozen anymore. Now to that milk we're going to add our 1/8 of a teaspoon of thermophilic starter culture. Now you may not have to at this stage add a starter culture because you're using raw milk. Now I wanted to make sure the curd set okay, so I did use a thermophilic culture in this instance. We're going to let that culture now rehydrate for about 5 minutes, so make sure that's covered. So 5 minutes later, we're going to stir the milk thoroughly to make sure that the culture has been mixed through the milk. Now one of the great things about sheep's milk is its fat content is so high. It's so creamy. It looks like cow's milk, but you've added like a litre of full cream to it. So it's quite amazing stuff. Anyway, we're going to just check the temperature there again, make sure it hasn't creeped up too high. And that's good, it's about 32, which is what the target temperature is. And we're going to allow the milk now to ripen for 15 minutes, or acidify, same thing. So 15 minutes later, we're going to add the other ingredients to the milk. So give the cultures give the milk a good stir. We're going to firstly add the calcium chloride solution. So give that a good stir through. And then we're going to grab the rennet solution. Just quickly checking the temperature there. And we're going to add the rennet to the milk. So make sure that you stir for no more than 1 minute during this stage, or you will break up the setting of the curd. Now, you're going to cover this and let it set for 1 hour at the target temperature. However, this did take 2 hours for my milk, and it could have been due to the ewe's milk being gathered during late lactation period. However, more on that later. Now I'm going to check for a clean break. As I said, it took 2 hours to get a clean break. And then the curd had set basically like cement. It was very, very hard. It was a very firm curd set, which is good in a way. However, we'll see what happens in a second. Now I'm just going to cut the curds into 1/2 centimetre or 1/4 inch cubes. So I'm going to use my curd harp there. Now, normally when I use cow's milk, I use a balloon whisk to make the cube sizes down to that 1/2 centimetre or 5 millimetre size. Now, as you can see there, I'm using the whisk and it looks like the curds are starting to fracture. So I don't know if I made a mistake here. This is certainly how I've done it before with cow's milk. So it kind of looks a little bit, I suppose it looks a little bit sloppy. Anyway, I did that all throughout, and just make sure the heat's off there at this time. And we're going to cover that, and we're going to allow the curds to heal for 5 minutes. Hopefully we can move forward with this. So 5 minutes later, you can see the whey is so cloudy. Now, as you can see there, that was very hard to lift the curds, but what we're going to do is gently stir them whilst heating to 48 degrees Celsius or 119 Fahrenheit over a period of 50 minutes. So you can see that they're very sticky. They stick together, the curds do, when you're using sheep's milk. And the whey is very, very cloudy. Now, I don't know if that's normal. This is the first time that I've used this type of milk. You can also see it kind of looks mushy, but it's not. Very, very firm, even though they're very small pieces. So the curd also had a tendency that it wanted to stick together. So basically what I had to do was stir it with my hands for about 30 minutes of that 50-minute period, while I was heating it up to 48 degrees Celsius or 119 Fahrenheit. Now, I made sure my hands were scrubbed vigorously with hot soapy water before I did this, of course. And this is the result. We got up to the target temperature, which was great. And the curd size was kind of what I expected for this style of cheese. So it was fairly small, about rice grain size. So we want that all to consolidate into one big mass. So we turn the heat off and we're going to allow the curds to settle for 30 minutes. I'll just take that off the double boiler steamer thing that I use there. So over to the sink area, we're going to drain the curds and whey through a cheesecloth lined colander, but retain the whey. It has so many solids in it, we're going to make another cheese with that in another video. So keep that there. Don't throw it away. No pun intended. So we pour the curds into the cheesecloth lined basket. They have been matted together, but that's okay at this stage. It's no issue at all. So we're going to move it over to the cheese press. First of all, just pull the cheesecloth down a little bit to make sure there's no folds in it. Put the follower on top, and we're going to press it 5 kilograms or 11 pounds for 30 minutes. So you need this initial pressing to help the cheese form its shape. So 30 minutes later, we're going to take that out of the press. And we're going to flip the cheese over. Just be careful at this stage, it may not have completely consolidated into a mass. So gently turn it over, redress it, pop it back into the press at 7.5 kilograms or 16.5 pounds for 1 hour. This helps to consolidate the curds even further into that wheel shape we're looking for. So an hour later, do the same thing again, take it out of the press. and it is fairly firm at this stage, not too hard to handle. Pop that back into the mould, put the cheesecloth over the top. I'm going to press it 22 kilograms or 50 pounds for 12 hours or overnight. So roughly it was 12 hours. I think it might have been 13 or 14, but 12 hours is a good benchmark. So this is a very firm pressing. I want to make sure that there's no mechanical holes in the cheese. So after the pressing time, we're going to remove it from the press, take it out of the mould. It was very hard to get out, and a very good consolidated cheese mass. I'm going to place it in the brine now at 18% salinity for 20 hours. That's a long time. This is a very dense cheese, so make sure that you turn it once at the 10-hour mark. So after 20 hours, we're going to remove it from the brine, and we're going to place it on a draining mat. So I'm just dripping as much of the brine off the cheese as I can. So I'm just using a bamboo mat and a bamboo cutting board there as my draining vessel. So air dry now for 2 to 3 days or until touch dry. This may occur earlier or later depending on the ambient temperature of the room. So we're going to ripen the cheese at 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit at 85% relative humidity for no less than 6 months. Now turn the cheese daily for the first 2 weeks, then weekly thereafter, and remove any mould with a simple brine solution with a little bit of vinegar. Pecorino Romano can be aged for up to 2 years for a very strong flavour. So as you can see, fairly simple cheese to make, except some of the issues that I had during the cheese making process. The curd set took way too long, and I'm not sure why. I think I used the right amount of rennet. The rennet's fine because I've used it for other cheeses in the last couple of weeks, so I don't think that's gone bad. The milk might not have been acidic enough to get it to rennet to coagulate in the right amount of time. Some of the other issues I might have had, I might have stirred a little bit too vigorously and plunged that whisk in and cut the curds up too much. There was so much solids in the way, I decided to make a ricotta salata, and you'll see that in a separate video. Anyway, all things have worked out okay. We've got a nice sized cheese. It does weigh about 1.2 kilograms, so it is fairly good. We'll see how much salt it absorbs after the brining. I'm going to let it air dry for a couple of days, and then I'm going to create a traditional natural rind on the cheese for about a month, and then I'll vac pack it. I'm going to let this mature for about 10 months as per the standards, and we'll see how that goes. So it'll be ready to eat in October 2018. You can check out how I made Vaccio Romano, which is cow's milk Romano, over here. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more cheesy content. You can also support the show via Patreon by pledging a monthly small amount that'll keep the show going. Thanks for watching, Curd Nerds, and I'll see you next time.